Please a round of applause for Cindy DeWitt.
I have to tell you, I'm really excited to be here tonight because I always end up doing presentations on assistive technology or transition for Hamlin Robinson School, so it's really nice to dip my toe in the water and do some of the other things that I'm actually quite excited and interested about. Back in 2013, there's an organization called Learning in the Brain, and they brought together a huge group of researchers and clinicians to try and collaborate and share knowledge from research to practitioners. And I attended probably one of the most profound lectures I've ever been in my life with Russell Barkley. And he did adult outcomes with attention deficit and just blew me away with the long-term implications of having difficulties with executive function and the outcomes by not developing that skill set. The rate of marital problems, the rate of inability to maintain a job, bankruptcy rates, all of those things are astronomically high because we're focused on how do I get you through school versus how do I build you into an independent functioning adult, which is something that you're going to see a little bit later. He talked about this concept of time blindness that really stuck with me in a way that I have continued to talk about since. And time blindness is the idea that, well, let's jump back a little bit. What are executive functions? This is the hot topic in the area. Everybody wants instruction in this area. Everybody wants clinicians to deliver in this area. And there aren't a lot of people out there with backgrounds in it. One of the first places that I tend to send people towards is speech-language pathologists because executive function has so much to do with internal dialogue and internal planning to be able to implement and follow through on different skills as we learn them. So for example, we all know about the difficulty initiating. A kid doesn't want to start the homework, a kid doesn't want to clean a bedroom, whatever. How do we get them over that hurdle of doing something that they're resistant to? We've all seen the poor time management where at 12 o'clock at night you're putting together the final book report and you've learned more about it than perhaps your student has. How do we alleviate that bottleneck, and how do we pull that back so there's actually learning that's going along with that? The difficulty with problem solving, I'm sure many of you have had your student walk up to a teacher and say, I don't get it, and the teacher says, what don't you get? And they just say, I don't get it. And that leaves a teacher no place to go, and they don't have a strategy to then address that to begin to drive down and get a sense of where the fundamental issue is. The poor organizational skills, everybody's very familiar with opening up the backpack and all sorts of wonderful smells and pieces of paper hitting you. And the difficulty asking questions. The questions have to be specific enough for the listener to be able to respond in an appropriate way. And again, we go back to that example of I don't understand it, what don't you understand, I don't know. Okay? So all of that comes back to oral language. And when we start talking about time blindness, it's the inability to think and plan in advance. So one of the things that Barkley said that was most profound to me was adults without executive function deficits can plan 3 months in advance. Adults with attention deficits and executive function deficits can plan 3 days in advance. Like, think about the magnitude of that. I was sharing a story with a couple here, and I'm going to tell it again because it's just too funny. My husband has very severe ADHD, and I moved in with him when I was in Chicago. He was running a multi-million-dollar consulting firm, had a great team around him. 3 months after he moved in, he came home and he hit the button to open the garage door. The garage door would not open. He didn't have a hide key, so he had to break a window to get into the house, unlock the door, flip the light switch, no power. Trying to figure out what happened. Very simply, I started doing his laundry. So he would do his laundry every 2 weeks and pay his bills at the same time. I don't let laundry sit around for 2 weeks. I started doing laundry every week. He stopped paying his bills. Okay, so he had a beautiful system set up, and I walked in and disrupted. So he has structures and systems that work very well for him over the years, but continues to have that challenge of how do I think ahead, How do I implement? Man's absolutely brilliant, cannot get our tax check in to save his life. And so, you know, we've begun to draw boundaries and say, you know, that's just not in your wheelhouse. You're going to take care of all the computers. I will make sure that the checks get in the mail. So we know also that adults on the spectrum have similar profiles and similar challenges in those areas. So the implications of that time blindness in the academic realm are profound and amazing. How many of you have students that have projects that are 3 or 4 weeks out? At some point in time, right? When do you typically find out about it? The night before, okay? So even if you, on your accommodation plan, have that you should be notified well in advance of when long-term projects are due, it doesn't happen. So if you don't have a system in place and some way to track, you're never going to know, and you're going to end up in that loop that you then can't change that behavior. So you've got to be much more strategic about it. Also, with that, we have the difficulty following instructions. I heard it, I don't remember it, I didn't understand part of it, and I come home and say, I know I'm supposed to do something, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Or a misinterpretation, I'm supposed to do something, you say, that doesn't sound right. No, that's what was said. And then you're like, this just doesn't make sense, and you have no place to go, right? Very common. Also characteristic of this, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, this will only take me 10 minutes, and 2 hours later, you're still not anywhere near done, okay? So these are significant, they affect one's ability in so many realms, and it affects so many aspects of academics. And you can watch your student's grade go from an A to an F overnight because of this very issue. So one of the things that we've talked about in my PhD program that was kind of central to understanding how to implement intervention is the idea of task analysis. And so if you think about something as simple as brushing your teeth, that seems like a very simple process. But if you go back and you think about all the steps that go into being able to brush your teeth, it is fairly complex. You have to be able to open up a cabinet to get the toothpaste out. You have to have the muscle control to be able to spin the knob to get the lid off. You have to have the muscle control to be able to deliver enough toothpaste. You have to coordinate where the lid is going to go, the toothpaste on, the whole 9 yards. This even gets magnified more when we start taking a look at something as simple as a book report. Now this is not very large, it's all written down in your handout, but think about all the places along the way where you can run into a roadblock and be completely oblivious and not know why the roadblock is occurring. I cannot tell you how many kids cannot figure out a book to pick. They sit there and they say, I don't know what's going to be good to read. And they don't have a strategy for finding something interesting to read that they're going to be excited about. So the book never gets picked. And then the book report never gets done. If they find a book, they have to actually be able to get it physically in their hands. If it's not in the library, how do I find it? You have to read it on the timeline. You can't read it the night before the project is due. And if you're not breaking it up along the way, and it's not an exciting book, you're really going to be miserable, okay? And that's where everybody starts spark noting. We all know that that's happening. Everybody familiar with spark notes? Do you remember Cliff Notes?
Yes.
Spark Notes are now Cliff Notes. Or Cliff Notes are now Spark Notes. There we go. Schmoop is another great one. They do an 8-minute. Okay. Schmoop, yeah, they do a little video thing. It's hilarious. It's great. It gives you all the fabulous overview. Okay, so now we jumped the little hurdle of getting the book done, and now we get to the big hurdle, which is the actual project around that. And you've got to identify the topic, build it according to teacher standards, organize, draft, edit, that whole process, and you've condensed it in such a short period of time, no child wants to put up with getting through it. And this is where the knockdown drag-out happens, and then you actually have to get it into the teacher's hands. Yes, everybody's had that, where it's still sitting at home, okay? Or in the notebook. My mantra for anybody with executive function deficits is, if it can be electronic, don't carry a piece of paper. So if the kid has completed the project, put it in the cloud, take a picture of it, whatever you need to do, and store it electronically. because then you have the data and you share the Dropbox or the OneNote or whatever with the teacher, so there's no opportunity for lost pieces of paper. Because think about that, then you have to go back and think about, where would I have put that piece of paper? Why would it be there? Okay? You've done this. I know you've done it on more than one occasion. Okay, so we've actually talked about all of these pitfalls already, and these are further steps that go into, how do I pull this project together? I have a bright, capable kid, and yet the final project that came out showed nothing of that knowledge base and how much they grew. And you've got to be strategic about how you're going to build that along the way. Okay? All right. So when we start talking about how time management relates to the task, you've got to think about students don't have a sense of how long a task will take. So you've probably heard you've got 5 more minutes, and 20 minutes later the video game is not shut off. 5 minutes seems very clear to you. You've got a sense of how long that is. Most kids don't. They're not used to looking at a watch, and they don't have a metric to begin to measure that by. So if you'll think back 300-400 years ago when we were standardizing measure, the length of a foot was an individual's length of a foot, right? We commonized a standard in terms of establishing time blocks. Not all kids have that time sensitivity. So that's one of the fundamental pieces you have to begin to build. So you have to teach them what 5 minutes actually means and how they're going to build around that, okay? We also have to manage competing factors for time. Ben has kids in here doing 47 different things that are of equal value. Bowling with friends is equally as important as as completing a book report. That social skills will serve in a very long period of time. So you've got to manage all of that around these projects. And if you can't think about how you're going to plan in advance, you have no way to begin to manage all of that. Okay? This is where we get into procrastination. This is where we get into lost materials. We don't know what an hour feels like, so you say this will take us 30 minutes, and that sounds like forever. Or you say it's only going to take 30 minutes, and it turns into 2 hours. We also have kids that have an inability to persist when things are difficult. So part of that then goes back to that internal dialogue. If I give you a long project, or you are helping your student with a long project, you probably use self-encouragement, or you encourage your student by saying, let's just jump this next little piece and then we'll take a 5-minute break, okay? You have developed the skill to continue to encourage yourself when things are hard. Kids with these executive function deficits and the time blindness don't have that skill. So we need to teach them to encourage themselves to persist. And they need to engage in that self-dialogue of, I can do this, I know I can go another 5 minutes, and I know that we will get done with this. So you need to be modeling that behavior and then encouraging your student to be doing that as well. How are you going to get through this? We're going to do it together. We're going to take it in little steps. I know you can do this. You've got to tell me you can do this. Okay? We also end up in a situation where kids can focus on unconsequential aspects or minor details such as the font. The font doesn't matter, the content matters, right? And so creating the rules of this is going to be our base font. When everything is done, you can pick the other font, but let's just come up with this is always going to be our standard font to work. And when we're done with working, you can pretty it up however you like, but let's remove that speed bump, okay? So everybody else can see, you can see all of these problems. The question is, what do you begin to do about it? And this is a very long-term process. If you think back to your learning many of the skill sets that you have today, how did you learn to pay bills? How did somebody learn to pay a bill?
Trial and error.
Trial and error, okay? You did it because you got a bill, right? And what happened when you bounced a check? Your power got cut off, you got a huge charge fee, you overran your debit card, right? Those consequences meant something to you. You could see the long-term implications of those. Our kids can't always see those long-term implications, right? What does it mean that an extra $35 was taken out when I ran to get a cup of coffee from Starbucks? How does that make sense? What effect is that going to have down the road? Okay? So you have to take this in small segments, you have to be able to plan ahead, and you have to be able to persist when things are hard. Okay? So we have to begin by teaching time awareness. So when we're doing small tasks, we need to set timers. One parent said, my student hates, you said already tonight, my student hates the countdown timer because I feel under pressure. So my response is, great, turn it to a count up timer, okay? You can also say, how long do you think this will take? Great, I'm gonna write down start time, I'm gonna write down end time. That's how long it took, okay? I also am a huge believer of using metrics that are more common. Big Bang with commercials is 30 minutes. Big Bang without commercials is 18 to 21 minutes. I don't know if any of you guys pull that part out with your TiVo versions of it, but that cuts it down. That gives you a new metric so that a student begins to get a sense of how long something is actually going to take. And you have to practice this on a regular basis. If you get in the car and you say, I think this trip is going to take us between 30 and 40 minutes, the student should be then thinking about that over time. And you could say, we're now at a halfway point. So you're beginning to build the sense over time by calling attention to it. Okay, I'm also a big believer in visual cues for time. ADD Warehouse makes a clock that as the time goes by, the face turns more red. And so you see the sweep of the hand with more red showing, and so it's a very clear visual indicator, and you're not trying to read the dials of a clock, because we know that that can be challenging as well. Okay, so let's talk about another way that we can do that. We can actually create visual timelines for kids. So if you have a student that can't get out in the morning, then you need to go get your laminator, draw up your timeline and say, this is when we're going to do this. Make sure you have clocks posted around the house in all the major areas. That includes the bathroom, because brushing teeth should take a certain amount of time and showers should take a certain amount of time, right? You'll notice I do have an initial wake up, because we all know that some of our students need more than one wake up to get going. One mom already said she had a great strategy. Do you want to share what you were talking about?
We got our son an Amazon Dot. They're about $40, and that's in his room, and that wakes him up, and it doesn't have a screen. It's just voice, and it also has an app. So if he's not getting up, I can access it and change the music or change the volume or essentially make it more painful to stay in bed.
I'm a huge believer in that, okay? That is a brilliant methodology because you've done that initial wake up and you know that you can make it more miserable and you actually have control without having to go in and initiate yourself. So we get feet on the floor, we get into a shower, they make waterproof clocks, put them in the shower because they will spend 20, 30, 40 minutes in there because, man, it's warm and comfortable. And watch your electric bill go through the roof, right? We get dressed, we get breakfast, we get backpack. Now, the one thing that I will say is, if a student is unable to keep to that timeline, then you move the timeline up. If you can't consistently hit the 8:15 before, we're going to wake you up earlier, which no kid wants. We're going to move that time up until you demonstrate that you can hit it consistently. And as you become more efficient and you beat that time, then I'll let you stay in bed longer. Okay? You need to have this posted in multiple locations. You've got the routine in your head. Your student doesn't always have that. Okay? So having it laminated, having it in multiple places. I'm a huge believer in having dry erase boards or dry erase Post-its. Amazon sells a huge variety of dry erase Post-it notes that you can peel on and off walls. And I'm a huge believer, you gotta have one by your door with your to-do list. Do you have your book bag? Do you have your lunch? Do you have your this? Do you have your that? And you're running down the checklist before you run out the door, okay? Watch the clocks, wear a watch. One of my families found that the Apple Watch was an amazing investment because they could haptically touch their child without physically being present to initiate them. Okay, because with the Apple Watch, you can send a message and it can vibrate on their wrist and make them aware. Okay? And we've already talked about switching the startup time. Okay, step number 2, we need to begin to communicate with the school to get a sense of how long things should take. Teachers don't want kids doing homework for 12 hours. Teachers have a maximum amount of time in their mind that homework should take. If they don't, they have not fully thought through what the homework assignment is intended to do. So you need to be communicating with the teachers and asking them approximately how much time should homework take on a regular basis. What's a long assignment? What's a short assignment? Then you need to hold to those timelines, because every time a teacher says it's 30 minutes and you work to 60 minutes and your child turns that in, you've just told the teacher that that 30 minutes was a reasonable amount of time. Okay? Hold to the timelines. And then that allows your student to say, I'm done too, and get a sense of what that time is as well. Okay? You want prior warnings for all projects that might take more than 2 days. That can be written into your Section 504 plan. It can be written in on the IEP. Okay?
Over what you just said prior to that, holding to, where you said holding to the time, like if it takes a half an hour and then 60 minutes to back off.
Okay. So teachers send homework home, and there's something called creep effect. I'll just add one more problem. It's not going to take that much longer. So they send homework home, and they've expanded the homework, and what should take 30 minutes now takes 45 minutes. If you persist with your child to get it all done, the teacher thinks that that 30 minutes is still appropriate. They don't realize that the homework assignment took much longer.
Right.
And so they just continue to add 1 or 2 more problems in because everybody turns it in.
Right.
Okay? They're not getting the feedback that that's too long.
Okay, that's what you're saying, to make sure you're giving
Yes.
feedback to the teachers.
You're
that
giving the
30
feedback to the
minutes is
teacher.
not
So
really-
you're saying, Joe worked on this for 35 minutes. I signed off that this is what we did during that time. And it is okay, I know this is sacrilege, it is okay to send incomplete homework back in. And you should be writing in your accommodation plan, either in your IEP or your 504 plan, that you're working to a time limit on homework, not to completion. Okay? And you can see the reason for this, okay? Because you have no time to actually enjoy your student. What a novel concept. Okay, we set timelines for homework and project works. We set a schedule. We budget time for our projects. When you know a project is coming out, you need to pull out your dry erase calendar. You need to say, we have to be done here with the big circle. Let's talk about how long it takes to write it. Let's talk about how long it takes to draft it. Let's talk about how long it takes to read it. Now we're back here. This is how much you have to bite off every day. Okay? I strongly encourage you, when you are doing that, to build in some extra time, because you will need it. And if they can then complete on the timeline, you can say, you know what, you beat the timeline, you've got bonus free time. Go skateboard, go hang out with a friend, go watch whatever, and you've got a reward because they were able to maintain the timeline goal. Okay? Step 4, as you're working on this project, you're going to have your visual cues for your time, and you're going to be checking things off on the calendar as you've completed them. So your child is beginning to see what's happening and how they're moving through time and completing the task as they go along. You're building that internal system for awareness that you inherently have that your student may not have. I say that with some reservations because we all know there's genetic components and we share with our children what we ourselves suffer from. So if you have your own issues with time management, this also helps you as well. Okay? And I'm a huge believer in using electronics when necessary. Alarms are great. Reminders are great, pop-up reminders. One of my students found an app on his iPhone that plays as a video game for his homework. So as he's completing his homework, he gets points for both putting assignments in and checking off that he completed them and checking off that he turned them in and earning points. It sounds ridiculous that that should be a motivator, but it is. So you use that to your advantage. Okay, Step 5, you have to have your team assembled around this. If you don't have the school coordinating with you, you are working at a deficit. And this is the challenging part because we know our teachers have 150 to 180 kids in high school, and you have to make your student a priority to get the information ahead of time. So you need to be in regular communication so that you know if something's coming up, you can see it coming down the line and you can budget and plan around that, okay? I would also establish in a family with multiple adults, a tag team system, because you've all gotten tired, gotten to the point of wanting to be less compassionate than you should be. Yes, and so being able to say hand off and swap it out is really valuable because your frustration is only going to frustrate them, right? Okay? I also am a firm believer in having a homework helper during the week and they become the bad guy. I am more than happy to be a bad guy for any parent in my office. And kids don't like it, but I'm like, dude, this is the way that it is. You're not leaving until we're done with this, and forget it. And we sit there and we stay until it's done. And you know what? Most of the time we get it done in time to play the game because they all know that that's the carrot at the end. And so it's pretty easy to get kids to do what I need them to do. I am also a huge believer in using any outside resources such as therapists to help you negotiate the contracts around these kinds of things, establish the rules, establish the boundaries, use terminology that works for everybody, okay? And make sure that you have scheduled appointments to work on tasks with your kid. That means you have to hold to the schedule as well. So just like you're scheduling your time for your own personal well-being, right, where you've got downtime away from your children, right? Because a parent that is not well-fed themselves for their emotional needs cannot parent well. So you need to be scheduling time for you, and you need to be scheduling time for your kid, right, for you to work on these things. It's all about balance, and you are as much a priority as your child is, okay? That's a big one. Okay, so you've put this process in place, and you're running this periodically throughout the school year. As you finish each project, you need to sit down and say, we just got through this. What worked? What didn't work? And how do we feel like the final product worked? And that's something that should be shared with the entire team. That should be a report back to the therapist. That should be a report back to the tutor. That should be a report back to the teacher. Everybody on the team should know whether or not the system worked and if it worked well. If it didn't work well, how do we come up with a strategy to make it work better the next time? Where did we find the real crux points were, and how can we be strategic to pass those the next time? Okay? Questions on any of this so far? Okay. All right. This is probably the most important piece. Celebrate the achievement. It gets so easy to be done and it's in and everybody's exhausted and we forget to come back and say, look at the mountain you just climbed. Look at what you learned along the way. This was awesome. Let's grab a bowl of ice cream. Or let's go play whatever game for 10 minutes together because that was amazing. Make sure that they get the reinforcement that they made gains and they made growth. Without that feedback, they don't know what they've done right. They don't know what they need to do differently. Reinforce what works. Okay, so then we have this major implication, which I talked to a couple of parents about before we started this. What happens after school? The reason you are doing all of this work prior to them graduating is we want them to go on with their life and not be living at home the rest of their lives. Okay? So you have to transition this skill set from an academic environment into a work environment. Okay? So we don't run into the failure to pay the bills, failure to clean the bathroom, failure to grocery shop, all of those kinds of things. This also has major implications in the work environment. If you consistently fail to get your projects in on time, you're not going to have a job. If you fail to make your meetings and appointments, you're not going to have a job. If you can't show up to work on time, we know what the outcome looks like, right? And that is the 33-year-old in your basement, right? Okay, so you have to teach lifelong skills beginning now. And you need to define what the skill set is for that adult, okay? There are many things that you have to be able to do as an adult, okay? We talk in my office about an IFK, an independent functioning adult, okay? And I joke about it, we're going to tattoo that across your forehead. You need explicit instruction. Everybody in here blew their bills one time. It is so much easier to learn it when you're 12 and somebody's helping you write out the check and showing you how to go over the bill and how to ask questions about things that showed up funky on the bill and who you call and talk to, okay? And we need to connect the implications of the school to that event as well. So there's a relationship there and they need to make that connection. So let me give you an example of that. Last summer, I had probably one of the most painful experiences of my life. I took 4 17-year-olds sea kayaking in the Broken Islands. And the organization system was abysmal. I had laminated stuff all over the place. Ironically, the student that was assigned to hand the laminated cards out to everybody to tell them what to do stored all the laminated cards because she thought they were so important she didn't want to lose them. And so nobody had anything that they needed. And at one point I said to my assistant, okay, so Joe can never find any of the things that we need to be able to go out and go do any of the things that we want to do during the day. You need to go talk to him. And so she went to the 2 guys' tents and said, we're going to organize all of your stuff. And she said, you want to know where your rain gear is, you want to know where your underwear is, you want to know where your toilet paper is. Let's get all of this arranged. And one of the kids finally went, oh my God, this is like organizing my backpack. That was such a profound moment, okay? That's the same kind of connection you want to be making with the book report and with real life adult skills, okay? All right, so when we think about those skills, we have money management, work life, chores, body management, which includes your student being able to talk to a medical professional about what their needs are and communicate what medications they're on and what is working or not working for them, okay? As we hit 17, 18, they need to be knowing all of that information and being able to share it appropriately, okay? They have to be able to manage transportation. What are the implications of transportation in the Seattle area? Traffic, right? How many of you have ever been stuck and not been able to get someplace on time? Then, yeah, everybody, right? Social life is equally important. As Ben says, it's much easier to learn skills when you're doing things with other people. And long-term education. Planning how to get through college is tough. There's a lot of courses you have to take and a lot of requirements you have to meet. You need to be teaching that skill set now. So when your student goes into high school, you should be reviewing. These are the courses that you need to graduate. When are we going to fill them in? Let's sketch it out. We've got room to move things around. Let's come up with a preliminary plan. Okay? All of these skills are difficult for anybody, not just students with executive function deficits. I mentioned one of my clients is actually a researcher in the field of psychology. He said current research data is showing that young adults who used to have executive function skills at a certain metric are now falling back, and young 20-year-olds are functioning at the level of 14 and 15-year-olds. And that's kids without issues. Okay? So this is difficult for everybody. It's particularly difficult for our kids, so we have to be more strategic when we're teaching them. Okay? Don't waste opportunity. Okay? You have to break down steps, take little increments, and build back up. Remember that task analysis, right? With the whole toothpaste thing. If I want to teach a kid how to pay a bill, I don't hand them the checkbook. The first thing that we do is we sit down and we organize bills. We're gonna take one bill, we're gonna go over it together so you know what this is. I'm gonna show you how it fills out, and we're gonna do this together for a couple of months. Then the next month, you're gonna take on the piece of filling out the check. And then the month after that, you're gonna fill out the check and get the stamp on it, get it out in the mailbox. The month after that, you're gonna review it yourself, you're gonna come to me, we're gonna write out the check together. You get the incremental build? Okay? Money management is one of the most difficult subject areas and one of the most damaging areas for young adults. How many people know somebody with extreme student loan debt? Okay? So if you are not sitting down and discussing the implications of taking out loans and what that is going to do to their opportunities as an adult and their ability to build long-term wealth to one day be able to retire, you are disabling your child. I mean, think about that for a minute. If you're taking out $100,000 in student loans, you're going to double that in paying that back. And that child is going to be put out for years and years away from being able to purchase a house. Okay? So you have to begin to build that knowledge and understanding now. One thing that I highly recommend is you can set pots of money so that a child begins to understand how to manage money. So I suggest a third, a third, a third. So you can do $7 as fun money, you're going to the movies, you want your own popcorn, that's great. You can go buy whatever you want. $7 is short-term goal. I want a new iWatch, or an Apple Watch, sorry, I'm not even giving it the right thing. I want a new Apple Watch, that's gonna cost $200. We'll pitch in 100, you have to pitch in the other 100. And they begin to see that savings over time build up to reach that goal. Then you need long-term savings. This is investment in an IRA, a money market, whatever. They make plenty of plans for young kids. By putting that money away now and having them think about where they're investing and why, they're going to begin to get the sense of the compounding interest and how that yields benefits in the long term. You're also building the habit. Okay? If you are a family that believes in tithing, a student knowing that they're going to be giving away 10% of the money that they get will get very strategic about who they give the money to. And it has value to them. And they can think about, where do I want to put that money and why? Who do I think deserves this? What is important to me in terms of social justice? Or where would I want this to go and why? Is the environment important? Okay? It gives them a sense of ownership and pride in that process. Okay? Learning to live within a budget. I am a huge believer in you can go online or you can make up your own bank books and you write your check to your student for going to school. They get a paycheck for going to school. They then get to pay you for doing laundry and making meals and driving them to school and paying for all the things that occur on a day-to-day basis. And they begin to see the flow of money in and out. And you can build a cushion in there so they actually see that they have money at the end of the month that then gets divided up and they put some in long-term savings and then they have some fun money. They've got some gain and benefit from that. Then they begin to get in that cycle of understanding how the money flows. Okay? If they make an oops, they get a soft consequence instead of a hard consequence. When you get 3 $40 lattes in a row because you overdrew your bank card, that's a huge ouch, right? And you can prevent that. But you have to step up and you have to put the system in place. And you have to make a commitment to do that.
So,
Okay.
excuse me, this like $500 a month, like at
It's
what
not
age?
real money yet.
Right, right. But at what age would you start doing that?
I'm not opposed to middle school for some students. I would say high school is the latest. I would start putting it in around 9th grade. And as you begin to do that, you also begin to transition them into paying a bill in the house. They are responsible for the cell phone bill for the home, or they are responsible for the cable bill for the home, or the sewer bill, or whatever, so they get a sense of what things cost and how fees get added on. Does that make sense? Yes?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that particularly good for kids to understand that lots of times we have to spend money on things that are not fun. That was my biggest deal in college. You even have to pay for my own shampoo. I mean, and that wasn't even, that was my freshman year, like, what?
I had one student who used her, her parents' health savings card for all of her feminine supplies. And had gone and had blown through the entire HSA account in 6 months. Because she was spending it on anything that she could think of that was remotely medical so that she didn't have to pay for it. Okay? They're gonna find a way to do it, right? Like, let's set them up so that that doesn't happen, okay? Do you see how we're beginning to build the skills over time? We start with that little bit of budget money, then we take on a bill, then we take on managing finances in the home. Boy, I'm seeing a head shake here going, oh my gosh, how am I gonna do this, right?
Yep.
Okay, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Okay? You're going to pick one skill. It can be home care. It can be how do we keep our house healthy and safe because we clean refrigerators, we clean bathrooms, we take out garbage, all of that kind of stuff. You're going to master that skill sooner than you think. And then you pick the next skill. Okay? These should not be huge things that you're trying to do all at once. You incrementally add them. And you budget time to do it.
I was just wondering about the managing an allowance and the live within a budget. Do those happen quickly? That seems.
I would do them separately. I would give money to begin to manage and then begin to work within the budget.
So you're saying, like, do an allowance, do the $7, do that for a while?
Do that for a while, then move to the, hey, you're gonna see how money would flow in a house.
Okay.
Because then that makes more sense. We've got a sense of the value of $7. Because I saved $7 over 10 months and then I got my Apple Watch. Because I also combined birthday money or whatever else, right? Okay? So if you don't see this over time, we're not building that skill. And you can see how the money component plays into the time component. You have to pay your bills on a monthly basis. You have to budget your money to be able to get through an entire month. You have to be able to budget your money to get through an entire year. Because you're going to have oopses. You're going to need new tires on your car, or you're going to have something break in your house unexpectedly, and you have to have the finances available to handle that, right? That's planning ahead and seeing the potential in the future. Okay? Everybody making that connection? Okay. How many people are still thinking there's no way I can do this? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah? Okay. So again, you need to sit down and pick one element. Start with the $777. Just start with something little and gradually build. Okay? Yes?
So if you give some money to a child, and the child doesn't want to split the money accordingly, my money now, I do whatever I want?
No. And the negotiation is up front is, so you are going to get an allowance. Long-term savings is money that we don't touch. This is an investment. This is an investment for life, so that when you're out of college and you need to buy a car, you want to put down payment on a house or whatever, you have that money set aside. That is money that we're not going to touch. You may say how that's invested, but it's not money that you have access to. Your short-term savings will be in the bank for a minimum of 6 months before you can access it. Your fund money, you may do what you would like with. So if that means you spend your $7 on the first day of the month, you don't have $7 at the end of the month, that's your choice.
But the child is not learning, you're telling the child what to do. Okay, I'm taking $7 and, taking the bank from you and investing, you know what I mean?
I understand what you're saying, but they've also, if you don't model
I
behavior,
see. Okay, yeah,
they don't understand the implications.
okay.
Yeah.
Do you think for that it's fine to give like the fund money in cash and do a ledger for the other two, the savings and short-term?
Yes, but they should see that in a bank account, and you should check the bank account.
Okay, so an actual bank account. not
Yeah.
at home, just here's a ledger.
Yes.
Because actually something.
Yeah, they need to see that money growing over time, they need to see that the interest accrues. Right? Because otherwise, you're not teaching them that that savings grows over time. It doesn't have meaning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you would take the step of giving them the money, having them, showing them the deposit and.
Absolutely. You can do the iPhone deposit, I have no problem with that, the automatic deposit. But that's learning that skill. And then that's the process, because that's very congruent to how do you pay bill. Right? You gotta set up the bill pay, or you gotta write out the check. Okay, so they're the concurrent skills. That's why it feels very huge, but when you start doing the little pieces build.
Sometimes when we try to do this, like, here's your fund money to spend, and this is to save for something a little bit bigger or whatever, oftentimes, not the long-term saving, but the short-term saving fund stuff, they're like, it's fine, I don't want to save for that anymore, I want to go do this fun thing instead. How hard and fast do you think you should be on the short-term savings side?
The short-term savings can be for a target of their choice.
And what if they decide,
If they
Which
change
is
their
impossible,
target after
right?
6 months because the video game is no longer fun and they want to move to a new target, that's okay.
but you're saying keep it as a target, and don't be like, all of a sudden, I'd rather just spend it on,
Movies,
yes.
yeah, no.
Okay.
It's a target. It should be a selected, this is a significant purchase and I'm building towards that purchase. And if the video game is no longer fun, where are you going to spend that money? Is that new pair of kicks really important to you? We can do that.
So you're also teaching delayed gratification as well as goal setting.
Absolutely.
Would you keep it 6 months regardless of age?
For younger kids that may not have that staying power, I might move that deadline up a little bit because that may feel too far out. Does that make sense? So you're going to adjust and adapt. When you get your kids older, it needs to be in that 6 month time frame so they get a sense of what 6 months is. Okay? Okay, so how do you move forward? Ironically, we kind of jumped into this, right? You are going to select a goal area. One conversation I have with many of my parents is there's life buckets. There's skills that all of us need as adults. Every family has values. I have families that believe arts is a core part of their family value, and their child will be engaged in music or drama or painting or sculpting or something. That art bucket is very valuable to them. Many families have religious values, and so that's a bucket, okay? So you need to sit down and think about what are our life bucket values, okay? Do we engage in returning things to the community? Are we artistically driven? Do we spend time together as a family unit doing vacations together? What are our priorities? Define those priorities. Also think about what skills does my child need to have as an adult to be effective, okay? Cooking is one of my favorite areas to jump into. If you think about an independent functioning adult, they should be able to do 7 breakfast, 7 lunch, 7 dinner. They should be able to go to a grocery store and buy groceries for a week. They should be able to cook and clean up a meal for you. Okay? How nice would it be if you actually came home to your junior and they cooked a meal every night? That is a very realistic goal. It's a very realistic goal. When I was 16, my parents handed me the checkbook and sent me to the commissary because we were a military family, and I did all the grocery shopping for the month for the family. And that's because I gradually learned it over time. You need to build in that same skill set. Okay? Break your skills into smaller portions. Go back to what does it take to take the toothpaste tube off, the lid off the toothpaste tube. Do small incremental gains. Pick your area, think about a baby step, implement the baby step. Then you're going to see the next step and you're going to build. Okay? Go for mastery at each level. That means the student is able to do it independently without mistakes at least 3 times in a row. Right? And then you gradually increase your goal for the next stage. Okay, this is a teachable skill to learn time management. It's hard. It's overwhelming. Small incremental growth, okay? It's gonna affect their functioning in school and in life. You're going to look at it in small portions because you're not gonna get overwhelmed because there's so much to do. And you're gonna use visual cues to help see the gains, help begin to understand time. You're gonna use all of those markers to get the sense of progress. Get a team together. You're not by yourself. Use all your resources. Be patient. And celebrate your successes because you're gonna have a lot. You really are. Okay, questions?
So it sounds like your parents did a really beautiful job of training you so that you were able to go grocery shopping for the family for the month at the age of 16. It sounds like they used a lot of the same practices that you're recommending and that those are very effective. You may not have a lot of experience directly with getting to adulthood and being lacking in certain fundamental skills, or you may have that experience. If you don't have that experience and you know somebody who did, or if you personally dealt with it, how in the heck do you build up an area where you're lacking in skill fast enough to help your kid learn it while you're trying to learn it, and you're so maxed out just doing life because it takes all your strength just to get through your job and not get fired?
Okay, so, I understand your plate is full. I get that, okay? All of life is about setting priorities, right? And at this point in time, for you, the priority may be, we need to maintain where we are and have stability. And that can be the goal for now, okay? Do you have other people who support your family? Parents, aunts, uncles, friends?
Kind of.
Do you have resources here at Ryder?
Do we have resources here? I don't know what resources here look like, so.
Okay.
I'm a stay-at-home parent.
Ben, are there resources here at Ryder?
And our colleagues, I mean, there's good support out there. I'm
Okay.
backing you,
I'm
you're
stay-at-home
saying like,
parent, so she doesn't know as much about that.
build the network.
Build your network. This is also part of transition planning for an IEP. Okay, so if you have a child in the public school system, this is transition planning for adulthood. That is required to begin at age 16. 14? 14.
Well, and with that DVR, Department of Vocational Rehab, they are required to do services. And I don't know if a lot of public schools know that. If you have an IEP or even a 504, they're supposed to be helping with transition support. And that might be independent living skills, evaluation, and coaching. A lot of special ed teachers in the public high school don't know that, though. It's a huge resource that's there.
So, I have to tell you, Ben is this walking gold mine.
No, I'm just a
He's
social
an
worker. Social workers, I'm not that. The social workers love resources, so that's.
That's what makes him a gold mine. He loves resources. He knows how to tap into those resources. If you haven't sat down with Ben and said, what can we do for my child? You are not taking advantage of a resource that is sitting there for you.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Dr. Dupuy, I didn't pay you for that.
So reach out to your team and say, this has got to be a priority. I can't do this. This has to be a priority as a team. Is your child in the public school system?
Not exactly.
Sharing? Even if your child is not in the public school system in his home's district is required to provide services.
Cool.
He knows about that.
Well done.
Like, you need to sit down and have a convo with Ben, because Ben will take this into smaller chunks and help you figure out a plan.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay?
Can you give some idea? So my son has ADHD, and the procrastination thing I can totally relate to. And he does way, he does way better with excitement to get started. So the excitement is often me getting upset, because that is a spark of excitement. And I would much rather have a cattle prod, electric cattle prod, because that could be another form of excitement that I wouldn't have to generate, I think that's illegal. Can you give something in between, me generating the excitement and me having a cattle prod?
Okay, so, there is I'm gonna make a reference and hang with me on this. There's an Amish habit called shunning. And what is the purpose of shunning? Changing behavior, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when they shun, they cut somebody off from whatever attention they would be getting otherwise. So they're not getting acknowledged by their family or whatever, okay? You have very, very high value because you are stimulus to your child.
Yeah, he does this banging, he starts banging, and he can bang longer than I can he can bang for 3 hours.
Okay?
And I can leave, but then I can come home and something is destroyed. And I just can't afford to have whatever it is destroyed that's gonna be this week, or this, time.
Okay.
So,
Are you taking advantage of all of the resources that are available to you?
I think so. We're in counseling twice a week. I don't know what
What
else.
does your IEP look like?
He goes to Catholic school.
So even in a Catholic school, the district is required to provide your child services.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You need to be using that to your advantage.
Okay,
You have no more bandwidth, they do.
okay. Okay.
By law, they must do it.
So I go to the local public school and say I need an
Yes,
IEP? Okay.
In writing.
And they'll do
In
an
writing.
evaluation. Yeah.
if this is what you are dealing with at home, you pay taxes. This is what your tax dollars are for, and they should be providing you these services. And that is where they can come in and say, let's redirect this behavior. Let's teach new behaviors. Go, Ben.
Ideas or strategies you've found when there's that pushback, whether it's a person saying, well, I don't really like time management systems, or, this is dumb, or they accept it initially and then they're not following through. So just some vignettes where you've helped parents help their kids over that hurdle.
Okay, I don't want to keep a to-do list. If you don't want to keep a to-do list, then your responsibility is X, Y, and Z. Okay, you must have your homework done, your grades must be at this level. We have no more than this many missing assignments because we're building this skill over time. We don't go from 0 to 60. If we typically have 30 missing assignments in a quarter, we go from 30 assignments to 20 missing assignments. We don't go for 0 straight out of the blocks, right? And then we celebrate the fact that we're only in the 20 range, right? We've had growth, and we celebrate that. When you have a student who doesn't like the system, let's think about other solutions then. And there is a component of needing a new shiny object, right? It is okay to repeatedly do iterations of a similar system. I have many of my students who the best part of the quarter is the first day when they get to go to Office Depot with $30 and buy their new notebook planner, dry erase, gel pens, whatever, for their new system that quarter. And they can come up with all sorts of great ideas of how they're going to use it, okay? It is also encouraging a student to be part of the solution. You have to create the space for the student to step into. If you are always doing for, they can't learn to do themselves. So you have to create the space, and that's very different for every student. Some of my students are able to take on, hey, you're doing breakfast in 3 months for the family. Some of my students, the big deal is you're deciding what we're having for breakfast and you're planning one element. You're in charge of fruit, okay? But you're creating the space for them to learn the skill and you're supporting that as they grow, okay? You have to go back and do the task analysis and say, what is a reasonable step for my student to take? And then how do I create that opportunity for them to do that independently? Okay? Your student may not be ready to handle $21. Your student may be ready to handle $5, and it's negotiated of how they're going to spend that for the family dessert. Let's go look at the baked goods aisle in the grocery store. We can do chocolate cake, we can do vanilla cake, or we can do brownies. This is your budget, how do you work within that budget? So you do a smaller piece to start, okay? It's that sense of control that also then keeps kids working, okay? So many of my students who don't like the to-do list come up with another alternative, let's see how that works, and then we're gonna do a postmortem. Okay, so you get a month to run it your way, and then we're gonna evaluate effective and ineffective, why or why not, and how do we go to the next level. Okay, and you have to adjust that based on the student's skill set. But this is something, the earlier you start, the more you have to build off of.
Do you ever see students that have the capability, but often
Choose not to, or it appears to choose not to?
appear to choose not to? I think it's more complicated
Yes.
than that.
Yes,
But sometimes it just works so well, and then it's like, what are you doing? And
Yes.
I like, don't want to be punitive when it's not appropriate, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it.
so does everybody remember Psychology 101? And we did Pavlovian, and you responded to the bell, right? Okay. We talk about positive reinforcement and we talk about negative reinforcement, right? People think that punishing a student is negative reinforcement. It's not. You're paying attention to a student and you are then rewarding them. Okay? So if you do the jump up and down and I can't believe you did that and oh my gosh, that's horrible, man, that kid just got all sorts of great attention. And they just reeled you right in. Okay? So you have to structure the win. You have to find the opportunity and you reward the win and you set it aside and you gradually build up. So if you have that big catastrophic failure, right, you go back and you say, okay, let's find something out of here to work off of. You know what, I like the fact that you actually came clean to me and you told me that we're in this situation. Now how can we move forward? Do you like this outcome? What are the repercussions of this outcome? Now what are we going to do about it? I will tell you one of the other most powerful things that I do with my students is I sit down and I run out with a high school diploma in Washington, and we make this many dollars per hour, and you time this out times 50 hours a week, and then you divide it by 12 months, and you end up with about $1,800. Now let's take rent off. Now let's take groceries off. Now let's take, right, and you strip it down, and they're in the negative zone, and they still don't have a transportation methodology or any way to buy underwear. Okay? The other one is sitting down and running GPAs. Kids don't know what grade point averages are. They don't know how they work. And so if you don't show them and say, this is your current GPA with 2 Ds, 3 Bs, and an A. And by the way, to get into UW, you need a 3.56. Right? They can't get that. They don't understand the implication of it if somebody has not walked them through all of those steps. You have to show, not tell. Yep.
I want to give you permission to pontificate.
Okay.
Earlier you said 20-year-olds have the skills of 14-year-olds. Why?
Because we're not allowing consequences and learning from consequences at the same level. So that's in the general population. For our kids with ADHD and other executive function deficits, there's a neurological component to it where their right front lobe is not developing at the same rate. And so if we're not stimulating it, we're not going to continue to grow. And we tend to let it atrophy because kids avoid doing it because it's hard. You know, this 40 years ago, if you went and took a neuropsychology class, they told you what area of the brain did what, and if you suggested that anything else could be going on, you were out of the program. Now we know that you can reprogram brains. We see brains light up in different areas with intervention. This is not static. We can teach skills, we can change brain-based behavior, but you have to pursue it. You can't just languish and let it go. And when something is hard, we tend to avoid. And if we tend to avoid, the skill atrophies even more. Yeah.
Do you ever reward financially, or is finances and you know?
So if you reward financially, you will forever be paying for the garbage to take it out.
Well, no, okay, so I was not for those, so like
Okay.
basic chores, but more school-related, behavior, progress, that kind of thing. So that you can say, you know, then over time, you earned this, I don't know if it's a good, it's a bad, it's kind of like.
I always
a
encourage
bonus.
parents to reward with events and sharing activities over money
Or screen time.
or screen time. Screen time is
Yeah,
huge issue. Huge. Don't use screen time as a reward. Experiences with you should be the reward.
Yeah, I know, screen time's,
Yeah.
that's just their choice. It's the only thing he wants to do. and
Yeah.
It's free choice time, so I
Right.
can't use it as a punishment or anything,
Mm-mm.
just reward or punishment, it's like, that's that.
Okay, so I have a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old girls, and both of them have their own unique issues. And so I'm listening to everybody talk about, you know, these projects, and I think part of it for me is there's a couple of things. One is I don't like to ask for help because sometimes I think my kid, like I have a daughter who's a little out of control, and I think, gosh, I don't want to ask for help because it seems like they may get what I get sometimes, and it seems overwhelming. So I sometimes deal with that where I don't want to ask for help. But the other part of that is I have this daughter reacts really strongly. And so when I try to do something consistently over a period of time, I think what happens is I get worn out because it's not happening. And what I think I'm hearing is that you're saying instead of maybe doing like, you know, whatever the project is, maybe take a chunk of it so that I can consistently do this really small thing. And then I go to the next chunk. Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm listening to all this, and I work for a medical simulation company. We talk about mastery-based learning for physicians.
Yes.
And they talk a lot about deliberate practice, and I'm just laughing going, I think what you're trying to say is that we need to make it deliberate.
Yes.
Like for our kids, and that, you know, it's doing that thing over and over and over again, and I love that you said they then have to be able to do it themselves 3 times, because I think I let them, they do it, and then I go to the next step sometimes, but they haven't shown me that they can do it 3 times. So you're basically saying, take this little thing, get them to do it 3 times, and then celebrate that, and then go to the next thing, no matter
Yes.
how big or small it is.
Yes.
Because it feels overwhelming.
Yes.
I mean, like one kid can't get out of bed and the other one can't stop screaming, and so I'm just like, but you want me to do what? I mean, really, you want me to do what?
Celebrate getting out of bed on time.
Yeah, I have one that won't get out of bed. One of them gets up too early, so it's just
Right.
interesting. I have totally different issues with both my children. But
you need to be sitting down with your
Yeah.
child and saying, what goal are we going to
Yeah.
set together?
Yeah, but no, you know, it's interesting. My one kid screams a lot, and we're seeing a psychologist that basically said, start talking quieter with them. Don't react. And I read a book called Duct Tape Parenting. I thought, I need to get the duct tape out and like cover my mouth. I like
not
want to
their
have it
mouth, it's yours, right.
all over the house so I can just stop talking, you know. And I think that a part of that is his point is stop reacting to them and that attention. So I think this is great.
Okay, so you know how your dog jumps up on you and you pet their head?
Yeah.
You just reward him.
Yeah. And
When your
I do
child
that all
starts
over.
screaming and you go, woo, you just reward it.
I'm a very sensitive person. Like I'm very intuitive, so I think that's part of it is that I just feel it all. And I
So
think that's
then
hard.
you need to step back, take a deep breath.
Yeah. Oh no, my watch is
Breathe.
telling me to breathe right now. I literally say that now. I gotta breathe. I gotta breathe. Like
Like earplugs, and I say, okay.
yeah.
Go
So,
get your noise cancellation
Yeah.
headphones.
So
No, I'm
when
not
you're
that I'm not
done-
capable. I think part of it is until you start hearing people talk about what to do, or like this psychologist makes so much sense. I'm like, oh, I can do that. It's just I haven't been, and so I've created these. Not that I
It was more, my son needed to know that I was going to disassociate with him, and
Yeah.
and that there was gonna be that separation, that I wasn't gonna lock with him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's what happens, is that we stop being an individual and we become this unit, this
Yeah.
dysfunctional unit, and that
Yeah.
feeds them.
Yeah,
And so
that's
by me
exactly what's
going,
happening
and I
with my
didn't even
daughter.
put earplugs in, I would just say, okay, well, it sounds to me like I need to put in my earplugs.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, yeah, I don't even have earplugs, but it would be non-responsive,
Yeah.
because I would be like, I have earplugs in to myself, and it was all like this mantra that I would do, and then he would be, I'm done. Because he wants to interact with you. They want interaction, but it's positive that you want to do that.
Yeah.
It's positive, so then he's calmed himself down because I've
Yeah.
taken
Ta-da!
myself
And
out
that's
of
what
it.
this guy, what's my
You
daughter
step
is,
back to fill the space, let
Yeah.
him fill the space.
my
Go ahead.
daughter is really smart, like my young 7-year-old is. She's got language like nobody's business. She said to me at 5, is that your discipline strategy? At 5. And it took everything in me to say, yes, go to your room. And then I went in and stood on the stairs and cried. I just like, I don't even know what to do with this kid. And that she's just so smart that she tries everything to get me to respond. So now I'm just trying to be quiet. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I have one of my kids on the spectrum who got the book, How to Grow a Parent,
Oh.
and has been critiquing his parents
Oh, yeah.
directly from the book,
Yeah,
which
that
is
would be
just
mine.
so great. I mean, so classic for him.
Yeah, that
So,
would be
like,
my kid.
and the other guys, remember, you gotta have a sense of humor in all of this.
Yeah.
You know,
I know, I laugh at that
find your
story.
beautiful moments, because you have amazing moments with all your kids, right? You have those amazing special moments, and you see growth in a totally different dimension than most people do, right?
I had an amazing special moment with my son before I was fired from trying to help with homework. And I was screaming at him, and he very calmly looked up and goes, does screaming ever really help? I said, yes, because I was going to explode. And I just did. But then another time I was able to turn it around when he was having a fit about something. I said, you know what? I said, learning to manage your feelings is really, really important. It's even more important than school. And I got this like, what? And I talked to him about, well, if you say the wrong thing to your boss, you might get fired. You have to be able to work with others. And so if you get really mad in an argument at work, you might get fired. You might say the wrong thing to a policeman, you might go to jail. And, so he kind of got that. So you have your good moments and your bad moments.
And again, you just showed him the future. You didn't allow the time blindness, you gave them the vision of what's coming down the road, right? So you gave a metric to your child by doing that. One more than,
Yeah,
That
I
is
just
giving
wanted
us-
to ask about the working to a time limit and not to completion. So I have a situation where there's a lot of avoidance, a lot of underlying anxiety. And we could work to a time limit and not
Get
get
nothing done.
jack done.
right.
And that doesn't seem acceptable to me. So I don't know how to work around that.
That is a really great conversation with your therapist, because at that point you're dealing with anxiety running the situation, and you've got to figure out the way to flip it. And the therapist should be part of that process to come up with a system, because if you just ramp it up and you let the anxiety run, you're building that habit and that behavior,
Totally.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so that needs to be in the IEP 504, that we had anxiety around this, and because it generates the pattern, we have to break the pattern. And so there may be several months where the goal is you're putting your name on a piece of paper, right? And you're working with your therapist to develop goals around that to do the behavior modification. Okay? And that's where getting that mental health professional in that process is so critical, because you don't want a hot wire, right? Thank you, you guys have been fabulous. I'll be back at home.
Thanks, folks, and the talk in April is on home to school strategies, increasing those communications. So in fact, if we talked about making sure you're working with your team, that's gonna be a good next step from that. So, thank you folks, thanks for coming.